Hi, this is Professor Ellis with Week 8 of Specialized Communications for Technology Students, English 1133 OL96, and this is Fall 2021. I hope everybody's doing well, that you're staying safe and healthy, and that all your friends and loved ones are also healthy and safe right now. I want to give us a reminder before we get too deep into the class this week, which I do hope to keep concise as possible. We do have a lot to go over, but I want to keep it as short as we can to give you time to be working on your research reports. But just as a reminder, my email address is jellis@citytech.cuny.edu. You can email me when you have questions. And of course, I also have my virtual office hours on Wednesdays 3 to 5 p.m. The link is on the left-hand side of our Open Lab site, as well as at the top of the syllabus, also on our Open Lab course site. I've already received some emails from folks. If we want to get ahead to like what we got going on this week, I sent out those check-in emails this past weekend because I was concerned about how the majority of folks in the class are doing. I understand completely that you might have a lot going on, but obviously you also have enrolled in our class. So it's imperative, if you want to pass the class, that you do the work, and you do the work as a process. It has to be something you do over time, not something you do all at once, because doing things all at once doesn't give you the benefit of allowing your mind and brain to think and develop over time with the types of exercises and skills that we do in our class. So I've heard back from most of the folks that I sent those emails to, and so this week hopefully I'll get to talk with most of you during office hours. A couple of folks said that we need to meet at a different time, so I'll get back to those folks about a different time that we can meet and talk. But it's important that we get everybody on track that wants to be on track and that can realistically be on track. Because I mean, one of the things you all have to think about in any class, regardless of whether it's my class or another one, is whether you can realistically, do the work, put in the time, give it the energy that it needs in order to produce deliverables to demonstrate what you're learning and doing. Because if you can't do that, I do want to encourage you to consider withdrawing from the class. That's just a practical consideration. I don't want you to drop the class, but I've been in similar situations when I was an undergraduate, and I did make those choices to withdraw and then retake the class when it was possible for me to be successful. And of course, that's what we can also talk about during office hours or in individual meetings about like what you individually have going on and how it's affecting your ability to participate in the class. So that being said, let's take a look at the review and then what else we're going to be doing this week. So in last week's class, we talked about building on that initial technical report research and the other kinds of sources that you can use in your research. There were the types of sources that I don't want you to be quoting from, I don't want you to be citing from, but I want you to use to learn things. Because learning about your topic from sites and sources that aggregate is a key word. It's a word that means to bring together. It means to bring information together from other sources. So an aggregator is not a source that creates new knowledge. It simply reports on knowledge that others have done. So like Wikipedia, for example, is an aggregator. It takes information from other sources, which are cited at the bottom of each Wikipedia page, and it reports that in essentially in a narrative, in a story form that you can read from top to bottom and learn about whatever topic that Wikipedia page happens to be about. The same is true for a lot of periodicals. I mentioned even like using Wired.com. Wired magazine is a long-running technology and science magazine. It's a really great resource. I've learned a lot of things from it, reading it over the years, many years. but it's reporting on things primarily that have happened elsewhere. Now, it does have some primary um, research, such as like interviews that they conduct themselves. But usually, when they're reporting on, say, a scientific report or maybe about research on a new technology, these are usually reports that have been made on research done by others. And when you read them, you'll see that they cite those sources. And so that right there is itself a cue to let you know that these are secondary sources and not primary sources. What we want for your research report are more primary sources. And so that's where we're going to be turning toward um, ebooks, and in particular, journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles that we can access through the library's website. But just to broaden it out a little bit, I also included as some of those sources that I talked about in week 7, that you could find books on archive.org that you can check out. Some you can just download to read, that have good material that you can use in your research. And then I also included the New York Times. Now, the New York Times is obviously going to be reporting, because they're a journalistic newspaper, so they report on things, some of which they observe, but oftentimes what is taking place somewhere else. So in that sense, it is a secondary source, but for our purposes, just to help move you along in your research and in the work you're doing on your research report, New York Times I allowed as a source that you can use, because they may have some coverage on topics, particularly historical coverage on some of the topics that you might work on or you might choose to work on for your research report. Now, for the 2 assignments that you worked on that are due today, you had the weekly writing assignment, in which I wanted you to go into some of those secondary sources, those aggregating sources that you won't necessarily be using to cite from in your research report, but again, that you can use to learn things. I wanted you to use some of those sources to learn some background on the topic you selected for your research report. And what's useful for you is that by learning more about that topic, by looking at the Wikipedia page and any associated or linked Wikipedia page, looking on Wired.com, looking on ArsTechnica.com, doing Google searches, seeing what's out there in relation to your topic teaches you things. You learn things from that. And that knowledge that you load up into your brain is going to help make your research using those primary sources much more successful and beneficial to your project, because you'll know more about what to look for to be able to separate what's useful from what's not useful. But when you don't know anything or know very little about your topic, it's hard to make a distinction between these things. So I do want you to do that background research, and then for the weekly writing assignment would basically be to tell me, or think of an audience of someone who doesn't know about the thing you're researching about, and tell them about it. You write a little bit, I think in the instructions, like 250 word memo, but basically, what is the topic about? What is it? Where did it come from? What is it related to? Just some basic points about the topic you've selected. And that's something that you write in your own words from what you've learned, what you've memorized essentially from looking at these background sources. Now, for the homework, what I'm looking for there is for you to study those different research reports that we looked at in our week 7 lecture. Some of them we looked at, and some of them I want you to look at on your own. And the idea is to begin seeing patterns. Look at what kinds of sections you need to include in a research report. And because each topic that students in the class might pick are different, there's no one single selection of section headings that you would want to use in a research report. Each one's going to be a little different. And so that's why I wanted you to do a little bit of studying by looking at those research reports and see maybe which one or ones might serve as a model for the particular topic you've selected. And so, armed with that knowledge of having looked at these different models, you would want to write a draft outline. The outline would essentially be the different headings, the different sections of your research report. And you would email that to me along with whatever topic it is you've selected for your research report. And I'll reply to your email with some feedback to make sure that you have a good plan, a good outline. Because if you have a good outline, the rest of the project is essentially, the term that gets thrown around a lot is called plug and chug, meaning that if you know of basically a cubby hole or space in your report that needs content, you look at that section heading, what is it about? Oh, okay, well, that's the kind of material I need to research to write about in that section. Once I've done that, I can move to the next section. So plug and chug. You plug some stuff in and you move on to the next. And so by having a good outline, it makes your writing that much easier. Without a good outline, you can actually be going off on a tangent, going in a wrong direction, writing about things that you may end up not using in your final draft. So I want you to have the strongest outline possible before you begin writing your research report. So this week, we've already talked about the check-in emails. So what I want us to focus on are how and where to conduct research. And now we're going to be looking at those primary sources in a little more detail than last week. And then we'll talk about the weekly writing assignment that you're going to do based on some of that research you're doing. Basically, the weekly writing assignment is a way of showing me that you're performing due diligence, that you're doing research, you're finding some material that you want to discuss in your research report. And then with the homework, basically you're going to be continuing your research. So the weekly writing assignment is just giving me a snapshot of the work you're doing, but obviously working on your research report requires more than what the weekly writing assignment is. Weekly writing assignment is just, again, a way that you demonstrate to me that you're doing due diligence on your project right now. So thinking about those other, like the research-oriented sources that you want to use for your research report, those are these at the top, these vetted sources for quotes and citations that you can use in your research report. And I went over this in the week 7 lectures, so don't mean to bore you, but I want to make sure everybody's on board with this. That this includes ebooks and articles from library.citytech.cuny.edu. That's our library's website. The ebooks that are available through archive.org, there's a lot of books that have been scanned from libraries that are available on archive.org that you can check out for free. You just make a free account on their website. And others you can just download for free and read on your computer. And then also nytimes.com. And as I mentioned in an earlier lecture, you go to nytimes.com/passes, P-A-S-S-E-S, and you create an account with your CityTech email address, and you get a free online subscription to the New York Times, just simply for being a student at CityTech. But you do have to use your CityTech email address to activate that. But these are the main sources that you can use in your research report. Now, again, before you get into this, use these sources that are an aid to your learning, such as Wikipedia, Wired, Ars Technica, Google searches, and social media, to learn more about the background of the topic that you're researching. Also, particularly like looking at Wikipedia, Wired, and Ars Technica, look at the sources that the articles are using. They may be a link inside the text of the document, or they may be references listed at the bottom of the document, as in the case of Wikipedia. If those sources are things you can find through the library or through archive.org, well, they're fair game. And actually, these things that you find on Wikipedia can be beneficial to your research. Because here, someone has said, like writing a Wikipedia article, this article published in this journal is actually, tells you a lot about this topic. Well, it may have been hard to find that article on your own, right? Here, they've listed it. Once you have like the title of the article or who wrote it and which journal it appeared in, you can go back to library.citytech.cuny.edu and then dive into the databases that I'm going to talk about today to find some of those sources that you find elsewhere. So again, I don't want you quoting material from these sources in your research, but any sources that they mention or that they reference that you can in turn find through our library's website and its resources, those are fair game, okay? Just want to be clear on that. No quotes from down here, but sources that you can then find through our library's website, those are fair game, okay? All right, so let's take a look at some of these different places that you can do research and then turn toward this week's weekly writing assignment, where you're going to be using these library sources to complete that very short partial annotated bibliography assignment. So to start out, just go to library.citytech.cuny.edu. Okay, that's where we always want to land when we're starting off our research. And if you scroll down the library's webpage, over here on the left, you have Start Your Research. You can find books, find articles, find ebooks, find journals. Well, first off, if you're wanting to see what kind of books there might be available for whatever your topic is, instead of going here to find books, if you see right here, right when you first land on library.citytech.cuny.edu, it defaults to find ebooks. Now, the library is open right now, and you can go into the library. Of course, you need to get your cleared for class thing set up on your smartphone, so you'll be able to show that you have your immunization record, so they'll wave you into the campus. But I think there's so much available with ebooks that if you can find things available through ebooks, you don't necessarily have to go into campus right now to do this research. So if I just leave ebook selected and go click into this little search box, what I can do is just type in some keyword that from your background reading on the topic you've selected, or just whatever the topic itself is, we can see what kind of ebooks there are. So earlier I was just doing searches for microprocessor fabrication, like how you build microprocessors. And so immediately I'm getting 43 results. These will be ebooks that I can read online through the library's website. Rapid system prototyping with FPGAs, graphene nanomaterials, like if I guess you're making like mechanical style microprocessors, real interesting things, like you basically have moving parts rather than trapping electrons and moving electrons around. Design structure, matrix methods and applications, lithography main techniques. This would be a big deal for learning about microprocessor fabrication, like the lithography of like you're using the design with different types of wavelength light to get chemicals to react on whatever material substrate you're using for building up the layers of your microprocessor. Civil avionics systems, that's probably not going to be relevant to what we're looking for. SOI lubistors, lateral unidirectional bipolar type insulated gate transistors, that may be interesting. Three-dimensional integrated circuit designs, EDA design, and microarchitectures, that sounds interesting. So immediately I'm already finding some stuff. Why don't we just take a look at one of these to see what's going on, like how you read one of these books online. So if I take a look at like this lithography main techniques, I'm going to click on the title, or I can click where it says available online. Both lead you to the same place. And so here I'm seeing some of the bibliographic information about the book. And if I look here, view online, try a link below, eBook Central CUNY Collection or the Wiley Online Library. Sometimes the ebooks will have more than one link, and if one doesn't work, you just press back on your web browser and try the next link. We'll just try the first one here for eBook Central, see what happens. So this actually does take us to ProQuest eBook Central. This is one of the providers of the ebooks that our library has access to. And you can see that you can read it online. You can download the book, but then you have to use special software on your computer to read it once you've downloaded it. You can download a PDF chapter, up to 81 pages of the book. And you can see there's also limits here, 21 pages remaining for copy, 81 pages remaining for PDF print chapter download. They put these kinds of limitations in place so someone doesn't just download the PDF and just give the whole book to anybody they want to. They assert their copyright to the ebook using different forms of digital rights management, DRM. But for us, I think the easiest thing to do is just to click Read Online. But now before I do that, I want to show you that on any of your research using library sources, always keep an eye out for a link that can look something like this. It looks like a little text bubble with some quotes inside, or simply the word cite. And like so here, they're offering you an opportunity to cite the book. That means to get its bibliographic reference for your references in your research report. So I'm going to click Cite Book first. So after I click Cite Book, you can see this window pop up, and the very first format that we have right there, APA, is what we need for our class, because we're using the APA format, the American Psychological Association, which is widely used in technical communication discourse for citing where material comes from. And it gives everything that we need. The editor's last name, first initial, is an editor of a collection, so we know this is a collection of essays by different authors. Title, lithography, we got the publisher after that. And so just to get the citation part for our notes, I can just select that, right-click, and choose to copy. And then remember, when you're doing your research, meaning like you're reading and looking at these materials through the library's website, you need to have that Google Doc open that we talked about in week 7, the research database document. That's where you should be putting all of your research. Any citations like this for anything you find, anything you want to quote from that you might copy and then paste into your Google Doc. Make sure you put quotation marks around it, and then also include a in-text citation at the end of anything you quote that indicates where it originated, as well as like any page number or other relevant information that we might need. Now, I'll give you links again to these materials, but they're already linked on the syllabus, and that is the Purdue Online Writing Lab, Purdue OWL. And a real quick way to find this is just simply to type in Purdue OWL APA into a Google search. And the very first hit that you're going to get will be the landing page for the general format of the APA formatting guide available through the Purdue OWL's website. I should let you know, the Purdue OWL has been around forever. I used it even when I was an undergraduate, and it's been continually updated and modernized, so it always includes really up-to-date information, so we don't necessarily have to go out and buy a style guide in our class. But if we scroll down, you see we have access to in-text citations, the basics, in-text citations, authors, reference list basic rules, reference list for authors, articles, and periodicals, reference list books. So when we're talking about books, why don't we look at that? I click on reference list books, and then it gives us access to the basic format, author, year of publication, title of work, publisher name, DOI if available. They give us an example here, Stoneman, R, published 2008. The book's title is Alexander the Great, A Life in Legend, and then the publisher, Yale University Press. they give us an edited book example. And so with this, we see exactly the same as what we're looking at with the lithography book, Landis S. Editor. So if I go back over here, authors, editors, and then the year, title, and publisher. So looking for that cite tool in whichever database you might be looking at on the library's website helps out tremendously. And remember, always change the format in case it doesn't default to APA. Look through the list and find APA for that. Now, some of the databases don't include a cite tool like this, in which case you're going to need to copy the bibliographic information and then reformat it for what you need in APA format. And we'll take a look at how to do that in just a second when we look at like an example of an article. I'm going to close that, so we just go back to this book page, and then I can click Read Online. And because I've authenticated already using my CUNY1st username and password, I'm able to click and then begin reading the book. Now, what's great about this is you don't necessarily have to read the entire book cover to cover. You might want to focus on a particular chapter, right? There may be a chapter that goes into detail for what you need. Or, like with this particular book on ProQuest eBook Central, there's this search feature. So if you know of a particular key term that you're looking for, so like I know that there's a key word when we're talking about making microprocessors called doping. It's like when you put in particular chemicals that are going to be added like on a layering of the microprocessor being built. And so by typing that in, I get some results here, and you can see those chapters that actually have that term show up will have like a little bar here showing me about where it's located at. And so I can expand that and then click on one of these, and it should highlight. Yeah, you can see here, doping and doping, those are highlighted, so I can find them very quickly. So that's the reason why I want you to do that background research this past week on your topic. So you're going to be thinking about what key terms are relevant to what you're researching, so that when you get into some of these books or articles, you're not having to spend like hours reading everything from start to finish. Well, obviously that would be great that you can do that. Maybe with like a really outstanding source that you find, you will want to do that because you want to learn about these things you're going to be writing about in an intelligent manner, in a technical manner. But for those that will simply give you some key ideas to play with in your research report, use the search features to narrow down where they are, so you can just read those sections, maybe those paragraphs even, and then pull out what information you need for your research report. This is being smart with your research so that you're not spending a lot of time doing reading that, I mean, if in a perfect world, if you had plenty of time, it wouldn't be a big deal, but obviously you got to get this done under certain time constraints on top of everything else you have going on in life. So be smart with your researching and use some of these tools that are built into these platforms available through the library. Or even just using like your web browser, if you're looking like at a PDF or a web page source, just press Control F or Command F if you're on a Mac, and that'll bring up the search feature of whatever web browser you're using. You type in a keyword, and it's going to highlight and show you where that keyword appears on the page. That way you're not having to dig and dig and dig to look for it. So again, be smart with using these tools for finding what it is you want to read and learn more about for your research report. Now, I want to go into the different databases that you can use for this project. So I'm going to go back to the library's website, So this is just library.cdtech.cuny.edu. And so you can use ebooks, right? But let's take a look at the journal article databases. And so I'm going to click over here on the left where it says Find Articles. Now, any database that we have access to under all these alphabetical lists here are fair game. Okay, I don't want you to think that you can't use any of them that I don't talk about. Any that are available through the library you may use. But I want to show you a few in particular that will likely help you find what you need and also be quality sources of material. Now, what we're looking for in particular are peer-reviewed journal articles, meaning that the articles have been vetted in a blind peer review process, meaning that the names have been removed from the articles and they've been evaluated by other professionals in the field anonymously so that they can look at what ideas are being presented, what results are being presented, and then make a judgment over whether they are accurate, whether they should be listened to, whether they have some veracity. And if two different reviewers agree that this is some new cutting edge research with new ideas that people should check out, then it gets published. And what's great about this process of blind peer review is it removes any impropriety from the process. Just because, say, someone is like a leading researcher in a field, or someone who is a very recognized name, like an Einstein, for example, or a Stephen Hawking kind of person, by taking the names off, everything that's being evaluated is only the ideas and the results. It has nothing to do with like the prestige of the authors or like what university they work at or company they work for. Everything comes down to what is in the article, not who is the person or persons that wrote the article. And then by also you're making it anonymous who's doing the reviewing, there's never like a fear of reprisal or getting back if like someone's essay or article is rejected for whatever reason. So it keeps the playing field level for ideas, that ideas are able to compete based on the strength of those ideas, not on any other like political or personal advantage that might be pressed. So let me show you some of the databases that I would recommend that you check out for your research report. And again, you can use others, like you may have seen in your other classes, other databases to use. So feel free to use those as well. But let me just show you some that I usually find very useful for students to use. So to start off, let's go to the A's. So I'm going to click on A here. And two that are worth checking out here are Academic OneFile by Gale, and the other is Academic Search Complete by EBSCO. Both of these are very good. So like right now in your notebooks, you need to be writing down these two different journal databases so you'll remember to go back and use them in your research. Let's see. Others I want you to take a look at include going to and go to IEEE Explore. IEEE Explore. There's going to be a lot of engineering and science stuff in IEEE Explore, whereas Academic OneFile and Academic Search Complete provide a very broad array of sources. Some are going to be of the scientific and technical variety that you need, but there's also a lot of other sources that are in there. So they're very general. IEEE Explore is very specific about science and technology stuff, particularly things that are published by the IEEE organization. Also useful will be L. If we go to L, there is Lexisnexis. Now, Lexisnexis is not so much on blind peer-reviewed articles, but it does give access to like news and magazine articles that you may use in your research. Again, those types of sources are usually not primary sources, But because I did say that everything that's available through the library is fair game, at least I know that they have been vetted as reliable sources by our library staff and, of course, by the Lexisnexis company that makes this database available. Now, another science and technology focused database I want you to know about is under S, and that's Science Direct. Science Direct. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you two more, but they may not have things as relevant for what you're working on, but it doesn't hurt to check them out to see if you plug in some of your keywords and see what might come up. Those other two are under J. Go to J for JSTOR. And the second one is under P, and that's for Project Muse. Now, again, it comes down a lot to what topic you've selected. So these might not be as beneficial, but I did want you to be aware of them as being useful sometimes for some topics. Now, why don't we take a look at Science Direct, just to take one of these databases as an example. And so you can see Science Direct, the way it looks here is it has different search boxes, right? Keywords, author name, journal, book, volume, issue, page. You don't have to worry about all that. What I want you to focus on is here where you type in keywords. And so earlier, before our lecture tonight, or today, what I did is I typed in, actually it saved my search here, microprocessor fabrication. Okay, so after I've typed in microprocessor fabrication, it's brought me up a whole bunch of results, 8,066 results. Now, before we look at some of the example articles that I found here, I want to show you on the left-hand side things that you can use to narrow down your results. And this is generally true for all the different databases that we have access to. And what's really great about the databases is something that I dislike about how Google works. I mean, if you can think way back when, search engines for the web, like say webcrawler.com, for example, they gave you results explicitly based on what text you typed into the search result box. But then came along Google, and when you would type in like a particular search term, it would bring up an ordered list of rankings based on like how many incoming links the different sources had. And then even further along time, Google improved on it so that they would try to anticipate, based on the search terms you used, based on what had the most incoming links, what was the most useful information to the user doing that particular search. Now, I'm ignoring, of course, how the rankings and everything else get adjusted because of advertising money, etc. Just thinking about the search algorithm itself. And that's really great, but sometimes I want to see the results as they really are, without any kind of rankings, based simply on what I've typed in. Now, one of the first things that I can do to help with that is after I have search results, you can see like for Science Direct, it gives me the option to sort by relevance or by date. And so if I switch to date, it's going to change what I see here based on what it thinks is the most relevant results to simply a chronological order from what's most recent to what's oldest. That way I won't have like one of my first results be from like 1983, for example, which might be kind of old, depending on like what kind of project you're working on. So you might need that to find an older article that will give you some of that historical background for what it is that you're writing about. But now you can also see over on the left a lot of ways to narrow down your results. So for example, I can narrow it down by subscribed journals. That means these are journals that we have access to through CityTech, and it won't be showing results for things that we can't read because you'd have to pay more money for those things. We can also narrow it down by the particular year. So like if I only want to see things that are coming out in publication next year, I can click 2022. For things that are either been published or scheduled to be published in 2021, I can just check that box. So that would give me access to just the latest stuff. Now for article type, I can also narrow this down. And what I want to always be looking for whenever it gives me an option, whatever database I'm using, for the article type, I want to look for things that are research articles or that are peer-reviewed articles. I'm not looking for encyclopedias, book chapters, review articles, etc. Though I will say you might find some useful information in these other types of articles, and you may quote from them. Okay, but if you're looking just for the raw, like latest research that's been peer-reviewed, you switch to research articles. Just going down the list, you can see other things like publication title. So like if I know the name of a journal that I want to be looking in, I can put a check next to that. I can select a particular subject area. And also you see this here, open access and open archive. So a lot of research that's out there, particularly in the past, is published by these very large publishing companies. Basically, as an author, such as myself, if I want my work to be published in a journal that's published by like a big company like Elsevier's or one of these other big companies, I have to sign my copyright over to them. And then they make money off publishing the research that I've done. Well, in recent years, there's been a movement to make research more open, especially research that's funded by public dollars rather than like your private research money. And so open access and open archive sources are those that are freely available. And so those are really great for us because City Tech has a finite budget in order to get access to these things. And so it can't access everything in the world. But the cool thing about open access journals is that anybody has access to them and can read them for free. And so if you want to see what's available specifically that are from open access journals, you can put a check next to that box on ScienceDirect. Now, each of the databases are a little different. I know that you've already experienced them or should have experienced them a little bit, like in English 1101 and English 1121. So you should have that familiarity with it. But what you really need to do is sit down and spend time playing around with the different search settings. Because the thing is, like, remember, you're never going to break any of these things, okay? Use a lot of the different settings, try out what you're able to find, what you can eliminate, etc., using them. And by doing that, you're going to learn more about how they work. That it's not something like you necessarily need a course in. You just need to spend a little time playing with them to better understand what you can and can't do with them. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at an article I looked at earlier before class. And it's this design of a soft error robust microprocessor, which sounds really great if we're going to be talking about microprocessor fabrication. Like here's one that has a design that deals with different types of errors that come from like environmental noise, etc. Now if I just click the title, the way ScienceDirect works is it gives me access to a PDF, so I can actually see what the printed copy of that journal article looks like. That's really important if I want to get like a page number for something I might quote from. Also, I can see the abstract on the landing page for the article. And with the abstract, this is a brief summary about what the article is about. And so I can read the abstract and understand, like in a snapshot, whether I want to look at the rest of this article or not. And that's really useful to you to look at the abstract before you do anything else so that you can kind of make a judgment call about whether you want to look at the rest of the article or not. Because if it doesn't sound like it'll have information useful to you from the abstract, you probably won't find, or you're going to spend too much time trying to find that needle in a haystack in the article itself. So use the abstract as a way to make that determination whether you should go ahead and read the rest of it or search the rest of it, or maybe move on to the next source in your list. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you here is the cite icon. So remember, you always look for that to help you out a little bit with citing your sources. Now, if I click cite here, though, you notice it doesn't work like it did when I was using the cite tool on the ebook central page. That's because Science Direct works a little bit differently, and that's to be expected. Now with Science Direct, it gives you options to save to reference works, which is a tool you can use for building references. I'm not going to be going over how to use that in our class, but you can look that up on your own if you like. You can export citations to RIS. It's a type of file that different types of citation software use. Again, I'm not going over that, but you can look into that on your own if you want. What I want to point you toward is export citation to text. And so if I click that, you can see here it brings me this option, like I can save it or I can open it like with whatever text editor that I'm using. I'm on Windows right now, so I'm going to use Notepad. Click OK. Took a little while, but there it goes. So here it's giving me all the bibliographic information about that article that I would need if I were to write a reference entry for it in my research report. And so it's useful for you to see how you can use this. And I'm just going to leave this here in the background. I'll come back to it in a second. I'm actually going to widen it out. There we go. So that you can use the reference list examples on the Purdue OWL website to create an APA formatted reference for a journal article. Now, we were just looking at books a second ago. So let's look at these different types of references that they list here in the table of contents in the menu. Reference list articles and periodicals. A journal is a type of periodical. It's a peer-reviewed periodical, but it's periodical because it's a type of document that gets published on a periodical basis, meaning every so often, whether it be once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, etc. So I'm going to click on articles and periodicals. So it gives you examples here of an article in print journal, an article in electronic journal, which is what we're looking at right now. And just to show you examples, there's also article in a magazine, article in a newspaper, a review, okay? But what we need is article in electronic journal because, what are we doing? We're looking at this journal article through the library's website, on a website itself, provided by the database publisher. So they give you an example of what one looks like here that uses a DOI, which is a document identifier. But if we look at the top of the page, they give you like a blank example that shows you like authors, year, title of article, title of periodical, volume number, issue number, pages, and then that doi.org link, right? So using this empty template as well as these models, one here using a DOI link if it's available, or this one using the URL to the article itself as models that you can use for your citations in your research report. So armed with the Purdue OWL APA website so that we know how to do our reference bibliographic entries that will go in our reference list at the end of our research report, and how to do in-text citations, which you're probably familiar with, like especially with English 1101 and 1121, you're probably using MLA style in-text citations, in the parentheses at the end of a sentence. Well, APA works similar, but there are some minor tweaks. But all that information we need about how that works is here on the Purdue OWL website. So why don't we take a look at how this is going to work for this week's weekly writing assignment, which is going to be an annotated bibliography of 3 sources. So make sure you have your notebook out, because I want you to write down how this is going to work. And I'll write up a brief synopsis of this on our Open Lab site for the weekly writing assignment. But for now, those of you watching the lecture, this will give you like a heads up introduction of how this is going to work for you to begin your research. So what I want you to do is create a new Google Doc, okay? And you can title this one Partial Annotated Bibliography. And this is going to be something you turn in for this week's weekly writing assignment. But also, the writing that you do here, you should also include in your research database document that you created in last week's class. Remember that research database document is where you put all your research, everything you find, all your references, your quotations, any of your own notes that you type up, your thoughts, how you want to discuss the quotes, all of that stuff should be in that research database file. I'm never going to look at it. That's for your benefit. But the reason why you create that document separate from your report itself is you use the database in tandem while you're writing the research report to pull things out of the research database and put them where they are appropriate inside of the actual research report that you're writing. And there's going to be a lot of things that you put in your research database that you'll never use in this research report. But the fact that they're there and you're not having to dig them up again later is going to save you some time and make things work a lot more quickly for you. And this is something I speak from personal experience. It's not like I'm making you create all these documents just to have you make a lot of documents for the hell of it. I'm doing it because I know it works. I use this technique myself in the way that I do research, and I know others do as well. So it's good to have these documents separate. And any of the writing you do for any of the weekly writing assignments, which let me check in on how you're doing, and also to see you doing the process of the research, is something that isn't just busy work. It gives you practice, but it's also work that you can recycle and put into your research report itself, okay? I don't want you to think like this is only for this week's weekly writing assignment. This work should in some way wind up in your research report, or at least be present in your research database file. So what I want you to do is create a memo, and it's going to be a very short annotated bibliography of 3 sources that you find using the library's databases. It could be an ebook, it could be a journal article, either is fine for this exercise. But what I want you to do is you have your memo block at the top, to, from, date, subject. You can see it's to Professor Ellis, your name, date, it's due on November 3rd, and the subject is Partial Annotated Bibliography for a Research Report. And basically, I want you to write a short paragraph for your first source that you find, a short paragraph for the second resource that you find, and a short paragraph for the third resource that you find, whether it be a book or an article. Either way is fine, okay? Now, these short paragraphs only need to have 2 sentences. The first sentence should tell me what the article or book is about. So my example here, the first article is about fabricating fault-tolerant microprocessors, that article that we were just looking at. Okay, that's the first sentence. Let me know which article it is. This is the first of 3, right? And what's it about? Fabricating fault-tolerant microprocessors, or whatever the article or book is that you're looking at. Then the second sentence includes a quote that you find that might be useful for your research report, that you might include in your research report. So you can see here I wrote, an important quote from the article is, space, and then in quotation marks, I took a quote out from the article. Besides the higher clock frequencies, such trends have made the IC, integrated circuit, more vulnerable to faults, especially those faults caused by radiation-induced effects or also electrical noise, end quote. And then there's a space here, and then I give my in-text parenthetical citation. Those are key words you need to put in your notebook, okay? In-text parenthetical citation. These parenthetical citations are put in text, meaning in your research report, and what they do is they refer to your reference for the article or book that goes at the end of your research report. And so after you give the quote with your in-text citation, I want you to write the full reference citation, the bibliographic reference citation, that'll go in your references at the end of your research report later on. So paragraph and then the reference. Paragraph for the second resource and then the reference for the second resource. Paragraph for the third and then the reference for the third resource. Okay? Now, you may decide not to use these in your research report later on. That's totally fine, okay? This is just to show me you're doing what you should be doing right now, which is research on the research report project in the class. And this work can be recycled into the research report when you're ready to do that. And you should also include all of this in that research database document so that you know where it is and you can easily pull it out and put it into your research report when the time comes. Now, I'll give you links to this, but just to show you right now, this in-text citation, all you need to include here is the author's last name. But now, in this case, I don't need to include all 3 authors' names, Bastos, Castensmith, and Rice. I can just give the first author's name, Bastos, and then write et space al period. That means Bastos and the others, comma, space, the publication date, that was 2009, and then the page that this came from, because I viewed the PDF, I found that quote here on the first page, and the first page doesn't have a page number, but I can see the second page is 1063, so that means that page before it is 1062, right? Page P period space 1062, close parenthesis period. That's the in-text citation. And then for the full reference citation, that I'm pulling. Here's the template. And then I looked at this model here at the bottom, where it gives me the authors, the date, the title of the article, the title of the journal, volume number, issue number, page numbers, and then the DOI link. Well, where did I get all that information from? Remember when I clicked on Cite a second ago? It gave me all that information right here on this text file. Authors' names, title of the article, title of the journal, volume number, issue number, publication date, page numbers, and here's my DOI link. Everything I needed was right there in that text file. So look for the Cite tool in any of the databases that you're using. And then once you have that information, you can use the Purdue OWL website to see how it all goes together and then type that into this memo. And you just need to do that only for 3 sources. That's all I'm asking for, Okay, now obviously you're going to need more sources than this for your research report, but just to show me that you're doing the research you need on the project, that's what the purpose of this document is. And of course, all this research you can put into your research report as well. Now, just to show you another one of those databases we talked about earlier and how the cite function works, why don't we go to the A's and Academic 1 file. I'm going to search for microprocessor fabrication. Okay, gave me 23 academic journal sources. Data prefetch mechanisms. C4 makes way for electroplated bumps. Silicon gains ground in quantum computing race. Nanofabrication of small copper clusters on gold. And as I'm going through, I'm just scanning the titles, really. I'm just looking to see what might be something kind of cool to look at. And this one, Nanolithography and Microelectronics, a review. This is a review article, which means it's going to be discussing the results of a lot of other articles, which can be beneficial to you if you can find those, because they help you understand the topic much more quickly. And the way that it's going to give you that information is for an audience of people that are trained in that discipline, right? It's not going to be the same as something you find in the New York Times or even on Wired.com, because those are more general audience publications. Here we have Technical Physics Journal talking about nanolithography. So this is going to be a very technical scientific type audience focus for this literature review. So if I click on that, again, it gives me an abstract, so I can read that and find out if I really want to spend more time with this or not. And then after that, it actually gives me the article right here inside of the web page. But now you can see at the top here, I got some options. I got an option to cite. I can download the article. And so if I want to see it the way it was actually published, I would want to click on download. And then it's going to give me an option to download the PDF for this. And so I can save that file and click OK. And then it's going to be on my computer, and then I can open it up with a PDF reader. But now, as far as getting your weekly writing assignment done and putting this information into your research report, research database file, what we want to do, and I don't want, there we go, we can click on Cite, and you see here it gives us some options. MLA 9th edition, APA 7th edition. We want to go with APA. And so we get APA, just select this stuff here, copy it. And now one thing to point out here, they don't give us a DOI link, but they do give us a link here to the article that a person can click on and then find the article itself. It's the same purpose as a DOI, but not all of these documents that you find will have DOI links. You can also use a link to the journal or the journal database itself. And that's pointed out here on the Purdue OWL website. You see here this model, this example shows DOI link. The second one shows us a link to a database location for the article. So either way is fine. We can use either one. So after I've copied that citation, I can go back over here to my memo, and this will be my second entry here. Paste that. That link is really long. That's why it's formatted like this, but that's fine. You don't have to change anything. You should look over it, make sure it looks right, that it follows the model, author, date, title, journal, volume, issue, page number, and then a link to the article itself. And so I want to say the second article is a literature review of nanolithography. And then I would go find a quote for that. And for my parenthetical citation, that's going to be Cyan, comma, 2011. And then I'd want to find the page I want to take the quote from. And actually, this starts on page 1061, just a coincidence to the last article. But we'll say that quote comes from page 1061. And then we got that. So again, for this exercise and for doing this research, the important thing is just to spend some time with these databases. Academic Search Complete, Academic One File by Gale, you got IEEE Explore, there's Science Direct, there's Lexisnexis, there's JSTOR and Project Muse, but there's a lot of other databases that you can use through the library, and of course you can also look for ebooks and use an ebook as one of your sources for this week's weekly writing assignment. Any of these are fair game for your research. So do the background research like we talked about last week, so you learn some things, you learn about the keywords to be looking for, and then apply what you've learned in the databases and through the library's website to really find some quality, vetted sources for your research report. And then just to show that you're doing that work that's necessary for the research report, this weekly writing assignment will demonstrate that to me, and it'll give you some practice with finding a quote, doing an in-text citation, and writing an APA formatted bibliographic entry for those three sources that you find. Okay, and they can be 3 books, they can be 3 articles, you can have 1 book, 2 articles, 2 books, 1 article, whatever combination, doesn't matter to me, as long as you're using those library resources to find some of this research. All right, so that's this week's weekly writing assignment, and it's all going toward doing the research report, so none of this will be wasted. This is going to be moving you forward on this research report. Now, for your homework is obviously to continue with this research. You need to be finding more than those 3 resources for your research report. The more you find, the more you get to write about. And just keep in mind that for everything you quote, you should be writing as much or more in your own words to explain what the quote means, what is the relevance of the quote, and how does it relate to what you happen to be discussing in your research report, okay? Always bear that in mind, that you never just put a quote there and never explain it. That's a person is going to wonder what the hell you mean. You need to make sure that you're always explaining and discussing any material that you quote in your research report. So with that, I'll be getting back to everyone that's emailed me for those check-in emails, or I'll be seeing you during my office hours this week on Wednesday, 3 to 5. And of course, you can also email me if other questions come up relating to the class or about like how you're doing in the class. And you can do that here. My email address is jellis@citytech.cuny.edu. And of course, the office hours are going to be Wednesday, 3 to 5 this week, unless I make special arrangements with to meet like whatever your schedule looks like. Okay. So take care of yourselves. Make sure you're masking up, maintaining social distance, doing everything you can to protect yourself and those around you, especially those folks that have weakened immune systems, are more prone to potentially catching the virus and being hospitalized by it. It's not just about taking care of ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves to protect those around us, okay? So take care. Good luck with everything you got going on, and I'll talk with you all real soon.